I never thought a 9-year-old could destroy my life with a single rock. But that's exactly what happened at my brother's 4th of July barbecue. I had just gotten promoted to senior software engineer at TechFlow Solutions, and after months of saving and waiting, I finally bought myself the Rolex Submariner I'd been dreaming about since college. $13,000 of pure Swiss craftsmanship wrapped around my wrist like a badge of honor. When I walked into Marcus's backyard that sunny afternoon, wearing my new watch and feeling on top of the world, my nephew Tyler immediately zeroed in on it like a hawk spotting prey, his eyes locked onto the gleaming steel and blue ceramic bezel, and I watched his face transform from casual interest to obsessive fixation in seconds. The moment Tyler spotted my Rolex, he bounded over with the kind of enthusiasm that should have been my first warning sign. This kid had energy that could power a small city, and today it was entirely focused on my wrist. "Uncle Johnny, that watch is so cool. Can I wear it? Please, please, please." Tyler's voice carried that whining tone that every parent recognizes as the prelude to a meltdown. "Hey buddy, this is a really expensive watch that's just for adults." I explained, gently crouching down to his eye level. "Maybe when you're older, I'll show you how all the parts work." Tyler's face immediately darkened like storm clouds rolling in. "But I want to wear it now, just for a minute." "Sorry, kiddo, this one needs to stay with me." "But look, your dad has that cool fitness tracker. Maybe he'll let you check that out." What happened next still gives me chills. Tyler's expression shifted from disappointed to calculating in a way that seemed far too mature for a 9-year-old. Without another word, he spun around and marched toward Marcus's decorative rock garden. I watched confused as he picked up a jagged piece of granite about the size of a baseball. "Tyler, what are you doing with that rock?" I called out, starting to stand. He turned back to face me, made direct eye contact, and I saw something in his gaze that made my blood run cold. There was no innocence there, no childish confusion, just cold, calculated anger. Before I could react, Tyler raised the rock high above his head and brought it down, with shocking force directly onto my watch face. The sound of shattering sapphire crystal cut through the backyard chatter like a gunshot. I stared in absolute disbelief as glittering fragments scattered across the patio stones. The impact had not only destroyed the crystal, but also cracked the blue ceramic bezel and bent the hour hand into a grotesque angle. But Tyler wasn't finished. As I stood there in shock, mouth hanging open, this 9-year-old boy looked me straight in the eye and slowly raised his middle finger with a smirk that belonged on the face of someone 3 times his age. "Tyler," I shouted, finally finding my voice. "What the hell did you just do?" That's when Marcus came running over, alerted by my outburst. He took one look at the scene, me holding my destroyed watch, Tyler standing there with the rock still in his hand, shattered crystal everywhere, and I expected him to lose his mind. Instead, he immediately wrapped his arms around Tyler protectively. "Whoa, whoa, what happened here?" Marcus asked, but his tone suggested he was already preparing to defend his son before hearing the facts. "Your son just destroyed my $13,000 watch with a rock, then flipped me off." I said, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. Marcus glanced at the ruined Rolex in my hands, then looked at Tyler with what I can only describe as mild disappointment, like the kid had spilled juice on the carpet. "Tyler, is that what happened?" Tyler's lower lip started trembling, and suddenly, he was the picture of innocent childhood. "I just wanted to see it better and it slipped out of my hands onto the rock. I didn't mean to break it." "He's lying." I exploded. "He grabbed that rock deliberately and smashed it, and then he gave me the finger." Marcus's expression hardened, but not toward Tyler. "Johnny, calm down. You're scaring him." "Tyler, did you use a bad finger?" Tyler shook his head vigorously, those crocodile tears starting to flow. "No, Daddy. I was just trying to point at the broken watch." "See, it was an accident." Marcus said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that Big Brother's perfect over decades. Boys will be boys, Johnny. Tyler didn't know any better. Didn't know any better? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Marcus, he's 9 years old, not 3. He knew exactly what he was doing. That's when Marcus's wife Sarah materialized beside us, having heard the commotion. She immediately scooped Tyler up, glaring at me like I was some kind of child abuser. "What's going on here? Why is Tyler crying?" she demanded. "Your precious son just destroyed my Rolex on purpose," I said, trying to keep my voice level. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "On purpose? Tyler would never do something like that deliberately. Obviously, you shouldn't have been flaunting such an expensive watch around children. What did you expect would happen?" I felt like I'd entered some kind of alternate reality where basic cause and effect had been reversed. Flaunting I was wearing my watch to a family barbecue, a $13,000 watch. Sarah emphasized like that somehow justified Tyler's behavior. Around a curious 9-year-old. That's just poor judgment, Johnny. The situation got worse as more family members gathered around the commotion. My parents Robert and Linda hurried over from the grill area, followed by my aunts Patricia and Susan, Uncle Bill, and cousins Derek and Amanda. "What's all this shouting about?" my mother asked, immediately noticing Tyler's tears and moving into protective grandmother mode. Marcus jumped in before I could explain. "Tyler had a little accident with Johnny's watch. No big deal, but Johnny's making a scene." "A little accident." I held up the mangled timepiece. "Look at this. Your grandson destroyed a $13,000 watch and then gave me the middle finger." Grandmother Patricia gasped and immediately knelt beside Tyler, pulling him into a hug. "Poor baby, you didn't mean to hurt anything, did you?" "Uncle Johnny's just upset about his watch." "I didn't mean to break it, Grandma," Tyler whispered, laying the victim act on thick. "It was an accident." "Of course it was, sweetheart," Patricia cooed, shooting me a disapproving look. "These things happen when adults bring expensive toys around children." Cousin Derek chimed in with his infinite wisdom. "Dude, doesn't your insurance cover stuff like this? It's just a watch. Just a watch." I could feel my blood pressure spiking. "Derek, this cost more than most people's car payments." Uncle Bill decided this was the perfect moment for one of his life lectures. "Johnny, I understand you're upset, but at the end of the day, we're talking about material possessions here. Tyler is family. You can't put a price tag on family bonds." "Right," Sarah added, stroking Tyler's hair. "And frankly, wearing something that expensive to a casual family gathering seems a bit show-offy. Maybe this is a good lesson about not being so materialistic around children." I looked around at my family, these people I'd grown up with, shared holidays and birthdays and graduations with, and saw nothing but disapproval directed at me. Not one person seemed to think Tyler bore any responsibility for what he'd done. Worse, they were actually blaming me for his destructive behavior. "You're all serious about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You genuinely think I'm the problem here?" Marcus put his hand on my shoulder with that condescending big brother gesture I'd hated since childhood. "Look, Johnny, I get that you're upset. But here's the thing. We're family. Family forgives each other. That's what family does. You're supposed to forgive and move on. Forgive and move on." I repeated slowly, staring at my brother's earnest face. "Tyler destroys my property, shows me complete disrespect, and I'm supposed to just forgive and move on." "Exactly," Marcus said, looking relieved that I finally understood. "That's how family works. We don't hold grudges over material things. Tyler's sorry, aren't you, buddy?" Tyler nodded solemnly, those manufactured tears still glistening on his cheeks. "I'm really sorry, Uncle Johnny. I didn't mean to break your watch." The family looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to complete this twisted little forgiveness ritual. I looked down at the ruins of my Rolex, then at Tyler's face, and saw something that chilled me to the bone. Behind those innocent tears and the quivering lip, his eyes held the same calculating coldness I'd seen right before he grabbed that rock. This kid wasn't sorry, he was proud. And my family was not only letting him get away with it, they were teaching him that he could destroy other people's property with impunity as long as he played the victim afterward. Sure, I said quietly, slipping the broken watch into my pocket. Forgive and move on. I'll remember that lesson, Marcus. The barbecue continued around us as if nothing had happened. Tyler ran off to play with the other kids, already back to his cheerful self. The adults returned to their conversations and their burger's crisis apparently resolved. I stood there alone, feeling like a stranger in my own family, Marcus's words echoing in my head. Forgive and move on. That's what family does. Little did Marcus know I was about to become an excellent student of his philosophy. Sleep eluded me for 3 nights after the barbecue. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's calculated expression right before he destroyed my watch, followed by that infuriating smirk as he flipped me off. But what haunted me even more was my family's reaction, or rather their complete lack of appropriate reaction. By Wednesday morning, I'd made a decision. If everyone was so convinced that Tyler's behavior was normal, then maybe I needed to do some research into what normal actually looked like for a 9-year-old boy. I started with a phone call to my cousin Amanda, who lived about an hour away in Springfield. Amanda had always been the most level-headed person in our family, and more importantly, she had 3 kids of her own, so she understood child behavior better than most. Johnny hi. Amanda sounded genuinely happy to hear from me. How are you doing? I heard there was some drama at Marcus's barbecue, but you know how family gossip gets twisted. Actually, that's why I'm calling. What exactly did you hear? There was a pause. Well, Mom said Tyler accidentally broke your watch, and you got really upset about it. She said Marcus had to calm you down. Accidentally, I repeated. Amanda, can I ask you something? Have you noticed anything unusual about Tyler's behavior recently? Another pause longer this time. Why do you ask? Just humor me. Has Tyler ever done anything to your kids or your property when you've been around him? I heard Amanda take a deep breath. Johnny, I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't want to cause family drama, but since you're asking, Tyler destroyed Emma's laptop at Christmas. My stomach dropped. What happened? We were all in the living room opening presents. Emma had gotten this really nice laptop for school. She's taking some advanced courses and needed it for her projects. Tyler kept asking to play games on it, and Emma kept saying no because it was new and had important stuff on it. I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. No. About an hour later, Emma went upstairs to set up her laptop in her room. She started screaming, and when we ran up there, we found the laptop on the floor with the screen completely shattered. Tyler was standing right there, and he said Emma must have dropped it. Did Emma drop it? There's no way. The laptop was on her bed, and there were clear impact marks on the screen like someone had hit it with something hard. But Tyler stuck to his story, and Marcus and Sarah, well, they backed him up. Said kids break things all the time, accidents happen, Emma should have been more careful. I felt that familiar surge of rage building. So Tyler never faced any consequences. Marcus offered to split the cost of repairs with us, but only after my mom guilted him into it. And even then he kept saying it was probably just an accident, and we were making too big a deal out of it. Amanda, why didn't you push back harder? She sighed. Honestly, because it's easier to replace a laptop than to deal with family drama. You know how Marcus gets when anyone criticizes Tyler, and Sarah's even worse. After hanging up with Amanda, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, processing what she'd told me. Tyler had a pattern of destroying other people's property, and Marcus and Sarah had a pattern of covering for him. But I needed more information. I drove over to Marcus's neighborhood ostensibly to return a grilling tool I'd borrowed, but really to talk to some of the neighbors. The first house I tried was Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived 2 doors down from Marcus. and had always been friendly at neighborhood gatherings. "Oh, Johnny," Mrs. Chen smiled when she opened the door. "How nice to see you. Come in, come in." Over tea and homemade cookies, I carefully steered the conversation toward the neighborhood kids. Mrs. Chen was happy to chat about the various families and their children, and eventually I brought up Tyler. That boy, Mrs. Chen said, her expression darkening slightly. Very energetic child. Has he ever given you any trouble? Mrs. Chen hesitated clearly, debating whether to share what was on her mind. Well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but last month someone threw rocks at my car windows, cracked the windshield, and dented the hood in several places. Did you see who did it? I didn't catch them in the act, but I found Tyler in my front yard the next morning looking at the damage. When I asked him about it, he said he was just checking to see if I was okay because he heard something might have happened to my car. That seems suspicious. Very suspicious. Especially since I found some of the same decorative rocks from the Marcus family's garden scattered around my driveway. But when I called Marcus about it, he said Tyler had been inside all evening and suggested maybe it was teenagers from another neighborhood. Did you file a police report? Mrs. Chen shook her head sadly. Marcus came over with $500 in cash, said he wanted to help out a neighbor, regardless of who was responsible. He was very insistent that involving insurance or police would just cause problems for everyone, and honestly, at my age, I didn't want the hassle. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. I thanked Mrs. Chen and drove to Tyler's elementary school. I didn't have an appointment, but I figured it couldn't hurt to try talking to someone in the administration. The principal, Mr. Rodriguez, was surprisingly willing to meet with me once I explained I was Tyler's uncle and had some concerns about his behavior at home. I can't discuss specific disciplinary matters, Mr. Rodriguez said carefully, but I can tell you that Tyler is a very challenging student. He's clearly intelligent, but he has significant issues with impulse control and respect for authority. Has he been suspended recently? Twice this semester. Once for deliberately breaking another student's science project, and once for pushing a teacher when she tried to redirect his behavior. Both times, his parents insisted there were extenuating circumstances. What kind of extenuating circumstances? Mr. Rodriguez chose his words carefully. Tyler's parents believe that traditional discipline methods don't work for him. They've expressed concerns that we might be unfairly targeting their son because of his spirited personality. Is Tyler in any kind of counseling? He sees the school psychologist Dr. Williams once a week, but again, I can't share details of those sessions. I left the school feeling more concerned than ever. Tyler wasn't just acting out occasionally. He was exhibiting a clear pattern of aggressive, destructive behavior that his parents were actively enabling by making excuses and avoiding consequences. That evening, I decided to do some deeper digging into Marcus's finances. As brothers, we'd always been open about money matters, and I still had access to some of his online accounts from when I'd helped him set up his business banking a few years ago. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had written checks or made cash withdrawals totaling over $8,000, all with memo lines like neighbor assistance, community support, and miscellaneous repairs. When I cross-referenced the dates with what I'd learned from Amanda and Mrs. Chen, the pattern became clear. Marcus hadn't been helping out neighbors from the goodness of his heart. He'd been systematically paying for damage that Tyler had caused buying silence and avoiding accountability. The $500 to Mrs. Chen wasn't generosity, it was a payoff. The offer to split the cost of Emma's laptop wasn't family support, it was damage control. I printed out 6 months' worth of bank statements and highlighted every suspicious payment. The evidence was overwhelming. Tyler was on a destructive rampage, and Marcus was covering it up with cash payments, probably funded by money he was skimming from the family construction business. But the most disturbing part wasn't the money. It was the realization that every time Marcus paid someone off, he was teaching Tyler that his actions didn't have real consequences. The kid was learning that he could destroy other people's property, and his father would make it all go away with a check and a sob story. No wonder Tyler had felt confident enough to destroy my watch right in front of me. He'd been getting away with similar behavior for months, maybe years. And no wonder the family rallied around him. They'd all been conditioned to see Tyler as a victim of circumstances rather than the perpetrator of deliberate destruction. As I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence of Tyler's pattern of destructive behavior, Marcus's words from the barbecue echoed in my mind. "We're family. You're supposed to forgive and move on." Maybe it was time to test just how committed Marcus was to that philosophy. The next morning, I drove to Marcus's house with a manila folder full of bank statements, receipts, and notes from my conversations with Amanda, Mrs. Chen, and the school principal. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say, how I was going to present the evidence calmly and rationally. I wanted Marcus to understand that Tyler needed help, not enablement. I should have known better. Marcus answered the door in his work clothes, paint-stained jeans and a TechFlow construction polo shirt. He looked surprised to see me standing there at 7:30 in the morning, but not necessarily pleased. "Johnny, what are you doing here so early? Is everything okay?" "We need to talk about Tyler," I said, holding up the folder. "Can I come in?" Marcus's expression immediately shifted from concern to defensiveness. "If you're still upset about that watch incident, we already discussed this. Tyler apologized, and you said you were going to move on. I said I'd remember your lesson about forgiveness, and I have been. But first, I think you need to see something." Reluctantly, Marcus stepped aside to let me into the house. Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee, still in her pajamas, and she gave me a distinctly unfriendly look when she saw me. "Marcus, what's he doing here?" she asked, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Apparently we need to discuss Tyler again," Marcus said with a heavy sigh. I spread the bank statements across their dining room table, pointing out the highlighted entries. "Marcus, I've been doing some research into Tyler's recent behavior, and I think you both need to see what I found." Sarah moved closer, peering at the papers. "What is this? Are those our bank records? How did you get these?" "You gave me access to your accounts when I helped set up your business banking, remember? Look at these payments. $8,000 in 6 months to various neighbors and family members, all right after incidents involving Tyler." Marcus's face was turning red, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or embarrassment. "Johnny, you had no right to access my private financial information. Mrs. Chen's car windows, Amanda's laptop, the Johnson family's fence, the Martinez family's garden decorations. You've been paying for Tyler's damage and calling it community support." "That's not what this is," Sarah interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really, because I talked to Mrs. Chen yesterday. She told me about the rocks thrown at her car and how you showed up with $500 in cash, insisting she didn't need to involve police or insurance." Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making the papers scatter. "You've been investigating my family, talking to my neighbors behind my back. What the hell is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me, Marcus? Your son is exhibiting a clear pattern of destructive behavior, and instead of getting him help, you're teaching him that he can destroy other people's property without consequences." "Tyler is going through a difficult phase," Sarah said, crossing her arms defensively. "All children act out sometimes. It's completely normal." Normal. I pulled out my notes from the school meeting. "He's been suspended twice this semester for aggressive behavior toward teachers and other students. The principal says he has significant issues with impulse control and respect for authority." "The school has it out for Tyler," Marcus snapped. "They don't understand creative, high-energy kids. They just want everyone to sit quietly in neat little rows." "He's seeing a school psychologist for behavioral problems." "At our request," Sarah said quickly. "We're being proactive about his emotional development. Unlike some people who think children should be perfect little robots." I stared at them both, realizing that no amount of evidence was going to penetrate their wall of denial. They'd constructed an elaborate narrative where Tyler was the victim and everyone else was the problem. "Look," Marcus said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone again. "I appreciate your concern, I really do. But Sarah and I are Tyler's parents, and we know what's best for our son. Maybe if you had kids of your own, you'd understand that parenting isn't as simple as you think it is. That hit below the belt, and Marcus knew it. I'd been struggling with relationship issues for years, partly because my demanding career in software development didn't leave much time for dating. The implication that I was unqualified to have an opinion about child rearing because I wasn't a parent felt like a deliberate attempt to shut down the conversation. This isn't about parenting styles, Marcus. This is about accountability. Tyler destroyed $13,000 worth of my property and then showed me complete disrespect. You not only refused to discipline him, you actually blamed me for his behavior. And I stand by that, Marcus said firmly. You were showing off an expensive watch around a curious child. What did you expect would happen? I expected a 9-year-old to have enough self-control not to smash other people's belongings with a rock. Well, your expectations were unrealistic. I felt like I was arguing with a brick wall. No matter what evidence I presented or what logic I applied, Marcus and Sarah had an excuse or rationalization ready. They'd convinced themselves that Tyler's behavior was everyone else's fault. That's when Marcus dropped the bombshell that changed everything. You know what, Johnny? I think you need to take a step back and really examine your priorities here. Because frankly, this obsession with material things is starting to concern the whole family. Obsession with material things. Dad's been watching how you've handled this situation, and he's disappointed. Really disappointed. He's been talking to Mom about whether you still understand what family values mean. I felt my blood run cold. What are you saying? Marcus leaned back in his chair with a smug expression that reminded me disturbingly of Tyler's smirk after he destroyed my watch. Dad's updating his will next month. The business, the properties, all of it. And he's been having some serious conversations about which of his sons really gets what family is about. You're threatening me with the inheritance. I'm not threatening anything. I'm just telling you that Dad's been watching this whole situation, and your reaction has raised some red flags for him. He's wondering if you've become too focused on money and material possessions to really be a good steward of the family legacy. Sarah nodded supportively. We've all been talking about it, actually. Your aunts and uncles, your cousins, everyone. They're concerned that you've lost perspective on what really matters. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The whole family has been discussing my fitness to inherit based on how I reacted to Tyler destroying my property. Based on how you've obsessed over it, Marcus corrected. A normal person would have been upset for a day or two, then moved on. But you've spent a week investigating my family, interrogating neighbors, digging through financial records. That's not normal behavior, Johnny. That's the behavior of someone who cares more about money than family. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a text thread that made my heart sink. The messages were supposedly from our father expressing disappointment in my materialistic attitude and concern about my lack of family values. According to these texts, Dad was seriously considering removing me from the will entirely unless I could prove that I understood what really mattered. This can't be real, I said, staring at the phone screen. Dad wouldn't say these things. Dad's old school Johnny. Family loyalty means everything to him. And right now he's seeing a son who's more concerned about a watch than about his nephew's feelings. Tyler's feelings. What about my feelings? What about the feelings of all the other people Tyler has hurt? See, that's exactly the kind of attitude Dad's worried about. Sarah chimed in. You're so focused on being right that you can't see the bigger picture. Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming more conciliatory. Look, I'm not trying to hurt you here. You're my brother and I love you. But the family's concerns are valid. However, I think I can help smooth things over. How the family reunion is next weekend. Everyone's going to be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole crew. If you could make a public apology to Tyler in front of everyone, acknowledge that you overreacted about the watch incident, and show that you understand what family really means, well, I think that would go a long way toward fixing your relationship with Dad. You want me to publicly apologize to Tyler for his destroying my property? I want you to publicly demonstrate that you value family relationships more than material possessions. Show everyone that you've learned from this experience and that you're committed to being the kind of man Dad raised you to be. I stared at my brother, trying to process the magnitude of what he was asking. He wanted me to humiliate myself in front of the entire extended family, to validate Tyler's destructive behavior and paint myself as the villain in this story. And he was using the threat of disinheritance to force my compliance. And if I refuse, Marcus shrugged. Then Dad will have his answer about where your priorities lie, and the family will know that you chose a watch over your nephew's emotional well-being. I looked at the bank statements scattered across the table, then at the fake text messages on Marcus's phone, then at the smug expressions on both my brother and sister-in-law's faces. They had this all planned out. They'd constructed a narrative where I was the selfish, materialistic black sheep who needed to be brought back in line, and they were using family pressure and financial threats to force me into submission. I need some time to think about this, I said quietly. Of course, Marcus said magnanimously. Take all the time you need. The reunion's on Saturday, so you've got almost a week to decide whether you want to be part of this family or not. As I gathered up my papers and headed for the door, Marcus called after me. Remember, Johnny, we're family. Family forgives each other and moves on. That's what family does. I drove home in a daze, Marcus's words echoing in my head. Family forgives and moves on. That's what family does. Maybe it was time to find out just how committed Marcus was to that philosophy. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect summer weather that makes you believe in second chances. The annual Johnson family reunion was being held at Riverside Park, the same location we'd used for the past 15 years. 3 generations of my family would be gathered under the pavilion sharing food and stories, and pretending we all genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I'd spent the week wrestling with Marcus's ultimatum. The logical part of my brain knew I should tell him exactly where he could stick his fake apology demand. But the emotional part, the part that remembered growing up with these people, sharing Christmas mornings and birthday parties and graduation celebrations, that part whispered that maybe it would be easier to just swallow my pride and play along. By Friday night, I'd made my decision. I would give Marcus exactly what he wanted. I arrived at the park around noon carrying a potato salad that I'd bought from the grocery store, but transferred into my mother's old ceramic bowl to maintain the illusion of homemade effort. The pavilion was already bustling with activity. Uncle Bill was manning the grill. With his usual dictatorial enthusiasm, Aunt Patricia was arranging desserts on the dessert table. With the precision of a military operation, and various cousins were scattered around picnic tables, catching up on a year's worth of gossip. Tyler was running around with the other kids playing some elaborate game of tag that seemed to involve a lot of shouting and dramatic death scenes. He looked like any normal 9-year-old boy enjoying a summer afternoon with his extended family. If you didn't know about the pattern of destruction he'd been leaving in his wake, you'd think he was just an energetic kid having fun. Marcus spotted me almost immediately and made his way over with Sarah in tow. Both of them were wearing their Sunday best smiles, but I could see the tension around their eyes. They were nervous about whether I'd go through with the public apology. "Johnny, glad you could make it," Marcus said, giving me one of those backslapping hugs that's supposed to project masculine affection, but feels more like a dominance display. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Beautiful day for a family gathering." Sarah studied my face carefully, probably trying to gauge my mood. "How are you feeling about everything?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking this week about what family really means," I said, which was true enough. "I think I've learned some valuable lessons." Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look of relief. They thought they'd won. The afternoon proceeded according to the usual reunion script. We ate too much food, listened to Uncle Bill's stories about his glory days as a high school football star, and endured Aunt Susan's detailed updates about her various medical procedures. The kids ran wild while the adults pretended to supervise them, and everyone carefully avoided any topics that might lead to actual conflict. Around 3 o'clock, Marcus decided it was time for the main event. He stood up and called for everyone's attention, tapping his beer bottle with a plastic fork until the chatter died down. "Hey everyone, before we get too much further into the afternoon, Johnny has something he'd like to say to Tyler. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me expectantly. I could feel the weight of the moment, the collective breath holding, as the family waited to see whether their black sheep would properly humble himself. I stood up slowly, looking around at all these people I'd grown up loving. My parents sitting side by side with matching expressions of hopeful concern. My aunts and uncles trying to look supportive while clearly being prepared for drama. My cousins, some curious, some bored, all watching to see what would happen next. And there was Tyler standing near the playground equipment, still holding a foam football, looking at me with those calculating eyes I'd come to recognize. Tyler, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the pavilion. I owe you an apology. I saw Marcus relax slightly in my peripheral vision. Sarah actually smiled. Last weekend when you broke my watch, I reacted very badly. I was angry, and I said things I shouldn't have said. Your dad taught me an important lesson about what family really means, and I want to make sure you understand that I've learned from his wisdom. Tyler nodded solemnly, playing his role perfectly. It's okay, Uncle Johnny, I'm sorry I broke your watch. I know you are, buddy, and I want you to know that I forgive you completely. Because that's what family does. We forgive each other and we move on. The gathered family members began to smile and nod approvingly. This was exactly the kind of heartwarming moment they'd hoped for. Marcus looked positively triumphant. In fact, I continued, I've been thinking a lot about the lesson your dad taught me. About how family members are supposed to forgive each other no matter what happens. About how we don't hold grudges over material possessions. About how we always give each other second chances and fresh starts. I paused for effect, meeting Tyler's eyes directly. I think that's such an important lesson that everyone in our family should really understand it. Don't you agree, Tyler? Tyler nodded, enthusiastically caught up in being the center of positive attention. Yes, family is the most important thing. Exactly, I said, raising my voice slightly so everyone could hear clearly. Family forgives and moves on. No matter what happens to our material possessions, we always put family relationships first. The applause started slowly, led by my mother, but soon the entire pavilion was clapping. Marcus looked like he'd just won the lottery. He'd successfully forced me to publicly validate his parenting approach and Tyler's behavior while positioning himself as the wise big brother who'd taught his misguided sibling about true family values. What Marcus didn't know was that I just laid the foundation for the most important lesson of Tyler's young life. The reunion continued for another hour with the usual mix of small talk and family gossip. But I noticed something interesting happening during that time. Tyler, emboldened by his public vindication and the family's continued protection, was becoming increasingly aggressive in his play with the other kids. First, he accidentally knocked over his cousin Emma's drink, soaking her new dress. When Emma got upset, Aunt Patricia immediately scolded her for making a big deal out of nothing, and praised Tyler for apologizing so nicely. Then Tyler broke a toy airplane that belonged to Marcus's nephew Jake, claiming it was already broken when he touched it. When Jake started to cry, Sarah quickly distracted him with promises of a new toy, while Marcus assured everyone that these things happen at family gatherings. But it was around 4:30 that Tyler made the move that changed everything. Marcus's pride and joy was parked in the parking lot adjacent to the pavilion, a pristine 1967 Camaro SS that he'd spent the last 5 years and over $70,000 restoring to showroom condition. The car was his baby, his masterpiece, the tangible symbol of his success as a contractor. He washed it twice a week, kept it covered in a climate-controlled garage, and only drove it on special occasions. The family reunion was definitely a special occasion. Marcus had driven the Camaro specifically so he could show it off to relatives who hadn't seen the completed restoration. Throughout the afternoon, various family members had wandered over to admire the glossy red paint job, the chrome details, and the pristine white leather interior. Tyler had been eyeing that car all afternoon. I was helping my mother pack up leftover food when I heard Marcus's voice rise above the general chatter. Tyler, what are you doing over there?" I looked up to see Tyler standing next to the Camaro holding a wooden baseball bat that someone had brought for the kids to play with. He was examining the car with the same intense focus I'd seen right before he destroyed my watch. "Just looking at your cool car, Daddy," Tyler called back innocently. "Well, look with your eyes, not your hands, okay? And put that bat down before you accidentally hit something." Marcus turned back to his conversation with Uncle Bill, but I kept watching Tyler. The kid was studying that car like a general planning a siege, and I could see the exact moment when he made his decision. Tyler glanced around to make sure the adults were distracted, then raised the baseball bat high above his head and brought it down with shocking force on the Camaro's hood, leaving a deep dent in the pristine metal. But he didn't stop there. As if a dam had burst, Tyler went into a frenzy of destruction that was breathtaking in its thoroughness. He swung the bat repeatedly at the driver's side door, the passenger door, the rear quarter panel, and both headlights. Glass shattered and metal crumpled under the assault. The sound of breaking glass and crushing metal cut through the family chatter like a fire alarm. Everyone spun around to see Tyler standing in the middle of a debris-filled bat, still raised, surrounded by the ruins of Marcus's beloved Camaro. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The sight was so shocking, so completely unexpected, that our brains seemed unable to process what we were seeing. Then Marcus started screaming. "Tyler, what have you done?" Marcus ran toward the parking lot, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, horror, and rage. The rest of the family followed, drawn by the magnitude of the disaster. The damage was catastrophic. The hood was dented in multiple places with scratches gouged deep enough to reach the metal underneath the paint. Both doors were severely damaged, with impact marks that had spiderwebbed across the surface. The passenger side window was completely shattered glass scattered across the seats and dashboard. The custom chrome trim was bent and scratched beyond repair. Marcus stood there staring at his destroyed car, making small choking sounds like a man having a heart attack. Tears were actually running down his face as he surveyed the damage. "My car," he whispered. "My car. Oh God, my car." Sarah rushed to Tyler's side, immediately going into protective mode. "Tyler, sweetheart, what happened? Are you hurt?" Tyler dropped the bat and looked around at all the shocked faces staring at him. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed to realize that he might be in actual trouble. "I was just playing," he said weakly. "I didn't mean to break it." "Didn't mean to break it." Marcus's voice was rising to a dangerous pitch. "You destroyed my car. You completely destroyed my car." "Now, Marcus, calm down," Aunt Patricia started, but Marcus whirled on her with fury in his eyes. Calm down, calm down. Do you see what he did to my car?" The family gathered around the wreckage, and I watched with fascination as they struggled to apply their usual Tyler protection protocols to a situation this extreme. You could see the mental gymnastics happening in real time as they tried to figure out how to excuse behavior that was so obviously deliberate and destructive. "Maybe he didn't understand how strong he was," Cousin Derek offered weakly. "He's just a child," Grandmother Patricia said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Cars can be fixed," Uncle Bill added, though he was staring at the damage with obvious shock. But Marcus wasn't having any of it. His protective father mode had been completely overwhelmed by the reality of seeing $70,000 worth of restoration work destroyed in under 2 minutes. "This is insane," Marcus shouted. "This is completely insane behavior, Tyler. What is wrong with you?" Tyler started crying real tears this time, as he finally understood that his usual escape routes weren't working. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm really sorry." "Sorry. Sorry doesn't fix my car. Sorry doesn't bring back 5 years of work." Sarah wrapped her arms around Tyler protectively, but even she seemed shaken by the magnitude of what had happened. "Marcus, please don't yell at him. He's scared." "He should be scared. This is not normal behavior. This is destructive. This is wrong. This is—" Marcus trailed off his hands, shaking as he gestured helplessly at the wreckage. And that's when I stepped forward to deliver the most important lesson of my life. "Marcus, I said quietly, walking over to put my hand on his shoulder, the same way he'd done to me at his barbecue. I understand you're upset. But here's the thing. We're family. Family forgives each other. That's what family does. You're supposed to forgive and move on. The silence that followed my words was so complete, you could hear the distant sound of traffic on the highway half a mile away. Marcus stared at me with an expression that cycled through confusion, recognition, and growing horror as he realized I was using his exact words against him. "Johnny," Marcus said slowly, his voice barely controlled. "This is different. This is my car. This is 5 years of my life. And my Rolex was $13,000 of mine," I replied calmly. "But you taught me that we don't hold grudges over material possessions. Remember you said Tyler didn't know any better." "He knew better than this." Marcus gestured wildly at the destroyed Camaro. "Look at this damage. This isn't an accident. Neither was my watch." I said, maintaining the same gentle, reasonable tone Marcus had used with me. "But you explained that boys will be boys. Tyler's just expressing himself right." Sarah stepped forward, still clutching Tyler protectively. "Johnny, this isn't the time for your games. Marcus is really upset." I was really upset too, but you all told me I was overreacting. You said I should be grateful Tyler was comfortable enough to be himself around family. I turned to address the gathered relatives, who were watching this exchange with growing discomfort. They could see exactly where this was going, and they didn't like it. "Remember what you all said at the barbecue last week? Uncle Bill, you told me that we don't put price tags on family bonds. Aunt Patricia, you said Tyler was just being curious. Derek, you said insurance would cover it." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Dude, this is totally different. This is like massive damage. $13,000 was massive damage to me. But you all convinced me that I should focus on what really matters: family relationships. So I'm trying to help Marcus understand the same lesson." Marcus was staring at me with dawning realization. "You planned this. You knew something like this would happen." "I didn't plan anything, Marcus. I just took your lesson about forgiveness to heart. You said family members are supposed to forgive each other no matter what. You said we always give each other second chances and fresh starts." I pulled out my phone and started recording video, speaking directly to the camera. "This is really beautiful, everyone. Tyler is showing such consistency in his self-expression. Just like with my watch, he's being honest and direct about his feelings. We should be proud that he feels safe enough to be himself around family." "Stop recording," Marcus demanded. "Turn that thing off right now." Why, I thought we were celebrating Tyler's authentic, emotional expression. Last week you said I should be proud to have such a spirited nephew. I continued filming as I walked around the destroyed car, providing commentary. "Look at this thorough job. Tyler really committed to his artistic vision here. The symmetrical damage to both doors shows real attention to detail. This isn't random destruction. This is purposeful creation of a new aesthetic." "Johnny, stop it," Sarah hissed. "This isn't funny." "I'm not being funny. I'm being supportive. Just like you were when Tyler destroyed my property. Remember when you told me that flaunting expensive things around children was poor judgment? Well, Marcus bringing a $70,000 car to a family gathering with curious kids seems like the same kind of poor judgment, don't you think? The family was looking increasingly uncomfortable as they watched their own logic turned against them. But I wasn't finished. "Tyler, buddy, come here for a second." I called to my nephew, who was still hiding behind his mother. "I want to tell you how proud I am of you for being so consistent." Tyler approached cautiously, clearly confused by the adult's reactions. "You know what, Tyler, I think you deserve a reward for being such a spirited boy. I'm going to buy you your very own baseball bat, a really nice one. That way, whenever you feel the need to express yourself authentically, you'll have the right tool for the job." Marcus went pale. "You are not buying my son a baseball bat. Why not according to your philosophy? We should be encouraging Tyler's natural impulses. Boys will be boys, right? Besides, it's just material possessions. You can always get another car. Johnny, please, my mother interjected, finally finding her voice. This has gone too far. Has it, Mom? Last week when Tyler destroyed my watch and flipped me off, you told me that these things happen when adults bring expensive toys around children. Isn't Marcus's car just an expensive toy? That's completely different, Aunt Patricia protested. How is it different because it belongs to Marcus instead of me? Because it's worth $70,000 instead of $13,000, or because now you can see how wrong it is to enable destructive behavior? The family stood there in uncomfortable silence, finally forced to confront their own hypocrisy. When Tyler destroyed my property, they'd rallied around him with excuses and rationalizations. But when he destroyed Marcus's property, suddenly they could see the behavior for what it really was: deliberate, destructive, and completely unacceptable. While they processed this uncomfortable realization, I had been busy with my phone uploading the video to social media with a carefully crafted caption. Family reunion highlight my nephew Tyler, showing his artistic side by customizing my brother's car, so proud of this spirited boy for expressing himself authentically. As my wise brother taught me, family means always forgiving and moving on no matter what happens to our material possessions. Tyler's consistent self-expression is something we should all celebrate. I tagged the local community Facebook groups, our neighborhood pages, and all of our extended family members. Within minutes, comments started pouring in from neighbors and family friends who recognized Tyler from previous incidents. Isn't this the same kid who threw rocks at Mrs. Chen's car? My daughter goes to school with Tyler. The teachers have been warning parents about his behavior problems. Someone should call child services. This level of destruction isn't normal. Why are the parents just standing there? This kid needs serious help. Marcus grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it back. What are you doing? You're destroying my family. I'm celebrating Tyler's authentic self-expression just like you taught me to do. Unless you think there's something wrong with his behavior, but that would be inconsistent with everything you said last week. More comments kept appearing on the video and I read some of them aloud. Oh, look. Here's someone who recognizes Tyler. They're saying he vandalized their mailbox last month. And here's a comment from the Henderson family about their broken fence panels. Sarah was frantically trying to quiet the comments section, but the damage was already spreading. The video was being shared rapidly throughout our community, and people were connecting Tyler's car destruction with other incidents they'd experienced or witnessed. Mrs. Martinez says Tyler destroyed her garden decorations. The Johnsons remember him breaking their fence. Even our old neighbor, Mr. Peterson, has a story about Tyler and his bicycle tires. I watched Marcus's face as the full scope of his son's destructive behavior became public knowledge. All those quiet payoffs, all those covered-up incidents, all those excuses and rationalizations were crumbling under the weight of community testimony. You see, Marcus, the beautiful thing about social media is that it helps people connect the dots. All these isolated incidents that you've been covering up with cash payments are suddenly part of a clear pattern. How did you know about the payments? Sarah demanded. I still have access to your business accounts, remember? $8,000 in 6 months to various neighbors for community support. Quite a generous spirit you have paying for all that random property damage that just happened to occur near Tyler. The final nail in the coffin came when Mrs. Chen herself appeared at the pavilion, having seen the video on Facebook. She'd driven over to check on the commotion, and she brought with her a folder full of security camera footage. I've been saving this, she explained to the gathered family, waiting for the right time to share it, but I think now is appropriate. The footage clearly showed Tyler deliberately targeting cars, with rocks destroying property with systematic precision, and displaying the kind of calculating behavior that contradicted every excuse about innocent childhood curiosity. As the evidence mounted and the community response grew, Marcus finally broke down completely. "Please stop," he begged. "Please just stop posting about this. We'll pay for the damage. We'll get Tyler help. Just please stop destroying our reputation." I looked at my brother, this man who'd threatened to have me written out of our father's will, who'd forced me to publicly humiliate myself, who'd spent years enabling his son's destructive behavior while covering it up with lies and payoffs. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I'm just applying the lesson you taught me. We're family. You're supposed to forgive and move on. That's what family does." The social media storm that followed my video post was unlike anything our quiet suburban community had ever experienced. Within 24 hours, the footage of Tyler destroying Marcus's Camaro had been viewed over 50,000 times, shared across multiple neighborhood groups, and sparked heated debates about parenting, accountability, and childhood behavior. But I wasn't content to let the internet handle this situation randomly. I had learned too much about strategic thinking from my years in software development to leave something this important to chance. If Marcus wanted to teach lessons about family loyalty and forgiveness, then I was going to be the best student he'd ever had. Monday morning, I created a comprehensive social media campaign that would have impressed my marketing colleagues. Using multiple platforms, I began systematically documenting Tyler's journey of authentic self-expression, with the kind of enthusiastic support that Marcus had demanded I show. Tyler Tuesday Spotlight, celebrating my nephew's consistent creative vision. The first post featured a timeline of Tyler's artistic endeavors, presented with the kind of glowing positivity typically reserved for honor roll announcements. I used the same language Marcus and Sarah had employed to describe Tyler's behavior, but applied it to the growing list of destruction that was emerging from our community. Tyler's creative process shows remarkable consistency across multiple mediums. Whether working with decorative garden rocks, Mrs. Chen's car project educational technology, Emma's laptop installation, or automotive customization, Dad's Camaro makeover, Tyler brings the same focused intensity to every piece. Each incident was framed using Marcus's own words about family values and childhood development. The effect was devastating because it highlighted the absurdity of their rationalizations, while making it impossible for them to object without contradicting their own stated beliefs. The comments section exploded with neighbors sharing their own Tyler experiences. Jennifer Martinez posted photos of her destroyed garden gnomes. "Tyler helped us redesign our front yard aesthetic without even being asked." The Henderson family contributed pictures of their broken fence. Tyler's boundary exploration project really opened up new sightlines in our neighborhood. Even Tyler's teachers began sharing carefully worded observations about his dynamic classroom participation and innovative approaches to conflict resolution. But the real breakthrough came when I reached out to all the families Marcus had quietly paid off over the past year. Using the bank records I discovered, I tracked down every recipient of his community support payments and invited them to share their experiences. Mrs. Chen was the first to speak up publicly. "I've been keeping quiet because Marcus asked me to, but I have 6 months of security footage showing Tyler deliberately targeting my property. The rock throwing wasn't random. He was testing different angles and techniques to maximize damage." The Johnson family posted their own evidence. "Tyler didn't accidentally break our fence. We watched him spend 20 minutes examining the weak points before systematically destroying the most expensive sections." As more families came forward, a disturbing picture emerged of Tyler's evolution from impulsive destruction to calculated vandalism. He wasn't acting out randomly. He was learning, adapting, and escalating his techniques based on what worked and what he could get away with. The most damaging revelation came from Amanda, who finally shared the complete story of Tyler's laptop incident at Christmas. I didn't tell the whole truth before because I wanted to avoid family drama. But Tyler didn't just break Emma's laptop. He waited until she left the room, then used a hammer from Marcus's toolbox to systematically destroy every component. When we found him, he was actually studying the internal pieces, trying to understand how the damage connected to the functionality. This wasn't the behavior of an impulsive child having an emotional outburst. This was the methodical approach of someone who enjoyed understanding how to hurt others most effectively. The psychological evaluation became even more troubling when Dr. Williams Tyler's school psychologist requested permission to speak with our family privately. What she shared in that meeting chilled me to the bone. Tyler shows concerning signs of conduct disorder with possible antisocial traits, Dr. Williams explained. His destruction isn't driven by anger or frustration. It's driven by curiosity about power and control. He systematically tests boundaries to see what level of harm he can inflict before facing consequences. But Marcus and Sarah keep insisting it's normal childhood behavior, my mother protested. That's part of the problem. Tyler has learned that his parents will protect him from consequences no matter what he does. He's not developing empathy or remorse because he's never been required to face the impact of his actions on others. The doctor's report, which I shared with Marcus privately, painted a terrifying picture of a child whose destructive behavior was escalating precisely because it was being enabled rather than addressed. If this pattern continues without intervention, Dr. Williams warned, Tyler will likely progress to more serious forms of antisocial behavior as he gets older. The family's protection is actually accelerating his psychological development in a very dangerous direction. But Marcus and Sarah refuse to acknowledge the severity of the situation, even when presented with professional evidence. They continued insisting that Tyler was just spirited and that everyone else was overreacting. That's when I discovered the extent of Marcus's financial cover-up. Using my access to the business accounts, I traced not just the neighbor payoffs, but also a pattern of embezzlement that went back over 2 years. Marcus had been systematically skimming money from our father's construction company to fund Tyler's damage payments, falsifying invoices, and creating fake expense reports to hide the theft. The total amount was staggering, over $40,000 diverted from company funds to cover Tyler's destruction. Marcus had been stealing from our family business to enable his son's increasingly expensive vandalism sprees. But the most shocking discovery came when I found Marcus's communications with an insurance investigator. Tyler's pattern of destruction had triggered multiple insurance claims that were being investigated for fraud. Marcus had been lying to insurance companies, filing false police reports, and pressuring neighbors to corroborate fabricated stories about random vandalism and unexplained accidents. What started as parental protection had evolved into a criminal conspiracy to defraud insurance companies and steal from the family business. Marcus wasn't just enabling Tyler's destructive behavior, he was teaching him that lies, theft, and manipulation were acceptable tools for avoiding consequences. I compiled all of this evidence into a comprehensive presentation that I plan to share with our father when he returned from his business trip. Robert Johnson built his construction company on principles of integrity and accountability. When he learned that his eldest son was stealing from him to cover up his grandson's antisocial behavior, the consequences would be severe. But before I could present this evidence to Dad, Marcus made one final desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. Thursday afternoon, Marcus showed up at my apartment with Tyler in tow, both of them looking like they hadn't slept in days. Marcus's usual confidence had been replaced by the hollow-eyed desperation of someone watching his world collapse around him. "Johnny, we need to talk," Marcus said, holding Tyler's hand with white-knuckled intensity. "Of course," I replied, stepping aside to let them in. "Family always has time to talk." Tyler looked different than I'd ever seen him before. The calculating smugness was gone, replaced by genuine confusion and fear. For the first time in his young life, his actions had consequences that his parents couldn't make disappear with money and excuses. "Tyler has something he wants to say to you." Marcus prompted, his voice shaking slightly. Tyler looked up at me with eyes that seemed older than his 9 years. "Uncle Johnny." I'm sorry I broke your watch. I'm sorry I broke Dad's car. I'm sorry I broke everyone's stuff. Tyler, do you understand why you're sorry? I asked gently. Tyler nodded slowly. Because I hurt people. Because I made them sad. Because I was bad. You weren't bad, Tyler. You were making bad choices. But the important thing is that you can learn to make better choices. Marcus cleared his throat. Johnny, I know I made mistakes. I should have listened to you about Tyler's behavior. I should have gotten him help instead of making excuses, but please, I'm begging you, don't destroy our family over this. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the manipulative, entitled man who'd threatened me with disinheritance, but the scared father who'd finally realized that his protection was actually destroying his child. Marcus, I'm not trying to destroy our family. I'm trying to save it. Tyler needs real help, not enablement. And you need to face the consequences of what you've been doing to cover for him. What do you mean? I know about the embezzlement, Marcus. I know about the insurance fraud. I know about all of it. Marcus's face went ashen. Johnny, please. If this comes out, I'll lose everything. My business, my house, maybe even my freedom. You should have thought about that before you started stealing from Dad's company to pay for Tyler's vandalism. I was protecting my son. You were enabling him. And in the process, you taught him that lying and stealing are acceptable solutions to problems. I showed Marcus the compiled evidence on my laptop: bank records, insurance correspondence, witness statements, psychological evaluations. The scope of the cover-up was damning, but the trajectory was even more frightening. This is where Tyler's behavior leads if it continues unchecked, I explained. Dr. Williams says he's developing antisocial personality traits. If he doesn't learn accountability and empathy now, he'll become someone who hurts people without remorse for the rest of his life. Marcus stared at the evidence with the expression of someone watching his worst nightmares become reality. What do you want me to do? I want you to be Tyler's father instead of his accomplice. Get him into intensive therapy. Make him face the consequences of his actions. Stop protecting him from reality. And the embezzlement, that's between you and Dad. But Tyler doesn't learn accountability if the adults in his life don't model it. Tyler had been listening to our conversation with growing understanding. Daddy, are you in trouble because of me? Marcus knelt down to Tyler's eye level, and I saw something in his expression that gave me hope for the first time in weeks. It was accountability. Tyler, I'm in trouble because of choices I made, just like you're in trouble because of choices you made. We both need to learn to make better choices. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Tyler's tears looked genuine. Not manipulative or calculated, but the honest grief of a child who was finally understanding that his actions had hurt people he cared about. I don't want to hurt people anymore, Tyler whispered. I want to be good. Then, we're going to learn how to be good together, Marcus replied, and I could hear the transformation beginning in his voice. The systematic breakdown of Marcus's denial was complete. Now the real work of rebuilding our family could begin. Friday evening, my father returned from his month-long business trip to find our family in complete chaos. Robert Johnson was a man who commanded respect through competence rather than volume, and at 68 years old, he'd built his construction empire by reading situations quickly and acting decisively. It took him less than an hour to assess the situation and understand exactly what had been happening in his absence. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation of everything I'd discovered: Tyler's pattern of escalating destructive behavior, Marcus's financial cover-up, the insurance fraud, the embezzlement from the family business, and the psychological evaluation that painted a disturbing picture of a child whose antisocial development was being accelerated by parental enablement. Dad sat at his kitchen table methodically reviewing bank statements, witness testimonies, video evidence, and professional assessments. His expression remained neutral throughout the presentation, but I could see the disappointment building in his eyes as the scope of the deception became clear. How long has this been going on? He asked quietly. The payoff started about 18 months ago, according to the bank records. But Tyler's destructive behavior probably began much earlier. Marcus and Sarah just got better at covering it up as it escalated. Dad nodded slowly, processing the implications. And the missing money from the business accounts? $43,000 over 2 years. Marcus created fake invoices for subcontractor work that was never performed, then used the money to pay for Tyler's damage and keep victims quiet. That's felony embezzlement. Yes, sir. Dad set down the papers and looked at me directly. Johnny, I need you to understand something. What your brother did was wrong on multiple levels. But this family crisis isn't going to be resolved through public humiliation or criminal prosecution. Those are tools for dealing with strangers, not family members. Dad, I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was trying to apply the lesson Marcus taught me about family forgiveness. I know exactly what you were doing, Dad said with a slight smile. And it was brilliant. You forced Marcus to confront his own hypocrisy by making him live inside the consequences of his philosophy. But now we need to move from teaching lessons to solving problems. That weekend, Dad organized a family intervention that was unlike anything we'd ever experienced. He brought in Dr. Williams Tyler's school psychologist along with a family therapist named Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in childhood behavioral disorders. Marcus, Sarah, Tyler, and I sat in Dad's living room while these professionals explained exactly how we'd reached this crisis point. Tyler's behavior patterns are consistent with early-stage conduct disorder, Dr. Williams began. But the encouraging news is that with intensive intervention and consistent accountability, children his age can still develop healthy empathy and emotional regulation. Dr. Martinez addressed Marcus and Sarah directly. Your protective instincts as parents are natural and understandable. But protection without accountability becomes enablement, and enablement of antisocial behavior leads to escalation rather than improvement. What does that mean for our family? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It means Tyler needs intensive therapy-structured consequences for his actions, and most importantly, parents who support his accountability rather than shielding him from it. The therapeutic plan they outlined was comprehensive and demanding. Tyler would attend individual therapy twice a week, family therapy once a week, and social skills training in a group setting. He would personally apologize to every person he'd harmed and participate in making restitution for the damage he'd caused. But the most important element was the transformation required from Marcus and Sarah. They would attend parenting classes focused on supporting children with behavioral disorders, learn to distinguish between compassionate accountability and punitive rejection, and most critically stop making excuses for Tyler's choices. Will this actually work? Marcus asked. And I heard genuine hope in his voice for the first time in weeks. Children. Tyler's age have tremendous capacity for change, Dr. Martinez explained. But the family system has to change first. Tyler learned his current behavior patterns from environmental feedback. If the environment consistently provides different feedback, he can learn different patterns. The financial consequences were severe but fair. Marcus would repay every dollar he'd embezzled from the family business, plus interest, through a structured payment plan that would take 3 years to complete. He would also compensate all of Tyler's victims for their damaged property, not through quiet payoffs designed to buy silence, but through transparent restitution that acknowledged wrongdoing. Dad made it clear that Marcus would remain in the family business, but in a reduced role with financial oversight until trust could be rebuilt. Accountability doesn't mean abandonment, Dad explained. It means earning your way back to full responsibility. The most powerful moment of the intervention came when Tyler was asked to speak with each person he'd hurt. Dr. Martinez had prepared him for these conversations, helping him understand the difference between apologizing for getting caught and apologizing for causing harm. When Tyler approached Mrs. Chen, his words were simple but genuine. Mrs. Chen, I threw rocks at your car because I was angry about things that had nothing to do with you. I hurt you because I didn't know how to handle my feelings. I'm sorry I scared you and cost you money. Mrs. Chen, who had been one of Tyler's harshest critics on social media, knelt down to Tyler's level. Thank you for apologizing, Tyler. I accept your apology. And I want you to know that I believe you can learn to handle your feelings in better ways. Similar conversations took place with Amanda the Johnson family, the Martinez family, and every other person Tyler had victimized. Each exchange was painful but necessary, forcing Tyler to confront the human cost of his actions, while demonstrating that accountability could coexist with compassion. The transformation wasn't immediate or magical. Tyler's therapy revealed layers of anger and confusion that had been building for years. He'd been struggling with feelings of powerlessness and inadequacy that he'd learned to manage through control and destruction. The family's protection had prevented him from developing healthier coping mechanisms, leaving him trapped in increasingly antisocial patterns. But as weeks turned into months, genuine change became visible. Tyler began expressing his frustrations with words instead of violence. He started considering how his actions affected others before acting on impulses. Most importantly, he learned that accountability actually felt better than protection because it allowed him to rebuild trust rather than simply avoiding consequences. Marcus's transformation was equally profound. Stripped of his ability to fix problems with money and excuses, he was forced to develop genuine parenting skills. He learned to set boundaries with compassion to support Tyler through difficult emotions without rescuing him from appropriate consequences, and most importantly, to model the accountability he wanted Tyler to learn. I thought being a good father meant protecting Tyler from anything that might hurt him, Marcus explained during one of our family therapy sessions. I didn't understand that some kinds of pain are necessary for growth. Sarah's journey was perhaps the most difficult because she had to confront years of maternal guilt and fear. She'd convinced herself that Tyler's behavior was somehow her fault, that she'd failed as a mother if her child wasn't perfect. Learning to separate Tyler's choices from her identity as a parent was an ongoing challenge. I thought that admitting Tyler had problems meant admitting I was a bad mother, Sarah shared. But I'm learning that good mothers help their children face problems, not hide from them. The ripple effects of this family transformation extended far beyond our immediate crisis. Other families in our community began seeking help for their own challenging children, inspired by our example of choosing accountability over denial. Dr. Martinez started a support group for parents dealing with childhood behavioral issues, using our story as proof that change was possible even in extreme situations. Tyler became something of a poster child for successful intervention. His teachers reported dramatic improvements in his classroom behavior. His relationships with other children became healthier, and most importantly, he began expressing genuine empathy for people he'd previously seen only as targets for his anger. 6 months after the Camaro incident, Tyler used his allowance money to buy me a simple digital watch as an apology gift. It wasn't expensive or fancy, but the card he included showed how much he'd grown. Uncle Johnny, this watch isn't as nice as the one I broke, but I bought it with my own money that I saved for 3 months. I wanted you to have something that shows I'm learning to think about other people's feelings. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I was being bad. As I fastened that inexpensive watch around my wrist, I realized it meant more to me than the Rolex had ever could. It represented something that couldn't be bought, genuine remorse, real change, and the kind of family bond that comes from surviving crisis together rather than hiding from it. But the most meaningful moment came during our family's 4th of July barbecue 1 year later. Tyler, now 10 years old and 18 months into therapy, was playing with his cousins in the same backyard where he'd destroyed my Rolex. When one of the younger kids accidentally knocked over a drink, I watched Tyler's immediate reaction. Instead of seizing on the accident as an opportunity for escalation, Tyler grabbed paper towels and helped clean up the mess. When the child started crying from embarrassment, Tyler knelt down and said, "It's okay. Accidents happen. Let's just fix it together. Marcus and Sarah stood nearby, watching their son demonstrate the empathy and problem solving skills they'd spent months helping him develop. The pride in their eyes wasn't the blind defensiveness they'd shown before, but the genuine satisfaction of parents who'd guided their child through real growth. You know what the ironic thing is? Marcus said, joining me at the grill where I was cooking burgers. Tyler's actually happier now than he was when we were protecting him from consequences. It's like he was trapped in those destructive patterns and couldn't figure out how to escape them. Kids need boundaries, I replied, flipping a burger. They need to know that someone cares enough to hold them accountable. I owe you an apology, Johnny, a real one. I was so afraid of admitting that Tyler had problems that I was willing to destroy our relationship to avoid facing reality. You were right about everything, and I was too proud to listen. Marcus, you were trying to protect your son. Your methods were wrong, but your motivations were understandable. No, it was more than that. I was protecting myself. I didn't want to admit that I'd failed as a father. It was easier to blame everyone else than to acknowledge that Tyler needed help I didn't know how to give. As the afternoon progressed, I watched our family interact with a closeness and honesty that had been missing for years. Tyler played with his cousins without aggression or manipulation. Marcus and Sarah participated in conversations without the defensive tension that had characterized their interactions for so long. Even the extended family members who'd enabled Tyler's behavior had learned to support him through accountability rather than excuses. The lesson that emerged from our crisis wasn't just about parenting or family dynamics. It was about the difference between love that protects and love that prepares. True family loyalty doesn't mean shielding each other from consequences. It means supporting each other through the growth that consequences make possible. As I watched Tyler teaching a younger cousin how to properly throw a football using patience and encouragement instead of frustration and aggression, I realized that Marcus had been right about one thing: family does forgive and move on. But real forgiveness requires real accountability, and moving on means moving toward better choices, not moving away from necessary consequences. My nephew had learned that his actions mattered, that other people's feelings were important, and that he had the power to choose kindness over cruelty. Those lessons would serve him for the rest of his life in ways that protection from accountability never could have. The watch Tyler bought me still keeps perfect time, and every time I check it, I'm reminded that the most valuable things in life can't be purchased. They have to be earned through the patient work of becoming better than we were before. Now I'd love to hear from all of you who've made it through this story. Have you ever faced a situation where family loyalty conflicted with accountability? How did you handle it when someone you loved was making choices that hurt others? Did you find the courage to hold them accountable? Or did you fall into the trap of protection that actually prevents growth? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Your stories might help other families who are struggling with similar challenges. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more real family stories, and share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of loving accountability. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and I hope your own family relationships are built on the kind of honest foundation that allows everyone to grow into their best selves. Remember, true family strength comes not from hiding from problems, but from facing them together with courage and compassion.